So welcome back to Impact Pasadena. It's my delight to be having a conversation with Kathryn Barger, who is a supervisor in the Board of Supervisors for the 5th District here locally. And we've been talking about all kinds of things already. And one of the things I wanted to dig into a little bit more, which we haven't touched on, is issues of justice, crime, and policing. And I know that this is an ongoing issue for the board. I know that you, part of your jurisdiction is the Sheriff's Department and for the whole county. So what are some of the issues that have been coming up in terms of crime and policing and the justice system as well?
Where do I begin? I'll begin at the beginning.
Please.
One of the things that we're tackling is diversion. And what is diversion? Mm-hmm. When we talked earlier, I talked about the fact that our jail is considered one of the largest mental health institutions. Yeah. Diversion means that the question is, are they in jail because they committed a crime as a result of their mental illness? And for a lot of them, the answer is yes. So if we can get them into treatment or keep them out of jail, it's going to save the taxpayers dollars, but it's also the right thing to do. And the statistic I use is we've got a mental evaluation team, mm-hmm. which is a team that pairs a sheriff's deputy with a psych social worker. When those MET teams go out, only 1% of the individuals they come in contact with end up being arrested. The rest go into a diversion program. Uh-huh. So one of the first, actually it was the first motion that I brought in when I was elected, was to increase the number of mental evaluation teams. And now we are continuing to grow. We are putting them in Covina. Covina shares one with a couple other cities, mm-hmm. A psych social worker that's paired with their police officers. Because if we can avoid arrest for those individuals that need mental health care, it is a win-win.
So somebody's on the street and they're drunk, let's just say, and they could be subject to arrest. That's where a psych team would come in and be able to make an evaluation.
Correct.
Or does it bump up into higher levels of crime?
No, I mean, well, that's an interesting question, because right now what we're doing is they've got sober treatment centers. Right. And we found that for those individuals, they don't need to be in jail. They need to be in an area where they can sleep it off and then be given referrals for treatment or care if they need it, or housing. Okay. So we put those into play. We've also got mental health urgent care centers. We're going to be opening one in the San Gabriel Valley, Antelope Valley. I just looked at the plans for that. We're putting a campus up there. We've got one out at Olive View. The goal is to give law enforcement, first responders, a place to take individuals that they may want to take to the hospital, but they're not sure if they're a 5150, which means they need to be hospitalized. Right. And it lets them drop them off. They get triaged by mental health experts. Okay. And then the law enforcement and our paramedics can go back out and do their job. So are there sentencing guidelines here? If you come before a judge, can you be diverted into a mental health facility at this point? I mean, I assume you can theoretically, but it's
but there are not enough beds, probably.
It's there's not enough beds, and we're working on that. Yeah. But more importantly, in order to have a judge declare you to be mentally incompetent, you've got to go before what they call Division 95, and that is really the mental health court. Mm-hmm. A situation like we just talked about, where someone's drunk on the street, wouldn't fall under that department unless they already are hospitalized and the hospital wants to keep them longer. Mm-hmm. Then they have due process. They have a right to go through due process, and they call it a Reese hearing. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes, it's a fine balance, because you've got to protect people's civil liberties. Sure. But we've got to build up capacity, both on the hospital but also on the step-down beds. Yeah. Because it doesn't do you any good if you stabilize them and then put them back out on the street. So
but the more facilities you have, the more discretion there is in the system to be able to help.
Absolutely.
Yeah, got it.
And it shouldn't be driven by resources. Understand that, and I get it. And I'm not, law enforcement. My husband's former law enforcement, so I understand how difficult it is. But the reality is that many law enforcement agencies will make determinations based on resources. And I get it. I mean, if they've got a shortage of officers, and they know if officers are going to be tied up for 6 hours trying to get someone to bed, unless they truly are a danger to themselves or to others, they're going to give them a warning and try to find them a place to stay.
Right. So the jail facilities, I know there's a jail plan out there that you're talking about. Can you discuss that a little bit?
Sure. So prior to being elected, the board had acted, and we've got a jail, Men's Central Jail downtown, which is disgusting. I mean, and I'm putting it mildly. It is. When I started with the county, it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Flash forward 30 years, it's beyond pretty bad. We are an accident waiting to happen. So we're going to tear it down. The question is, what do you put up?
Right.
We had a firm by the name of Banner come in, which Banner designed all the prisons in the state of California. That's their area of expertise. And they looked at criteria, and it's not just for today.
Yeah.
We're talking about for 30 years down the
Sure.
road. So Banner brought forward a plan, which the board voted on. And it was a replacement facility, which included services for mental health. It was not a hospital, but services for mental health. It was basically a jail. The board, before I got elected, brought in another expert because diversion came into play.
Right.
And the thought was, we need to have someone who's an expert in diversion look at this and make sure we're not building too many beds or we're doing it right. Not only did they come in saying you need more beds, they did restructure how we did it with mental health, and they said you need to have more mental health, but they said you need to have more beds. Understanding we're not talking about in 5 years, we're talking about for the next generation.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the board did not want to take that recommendation, and we have downsized the scope and the plan of the jail. We've awarded a contractor, but we're looking now more at, and we just voted on it last week, and I was the third vote. It was Supervisor Ridley Thomas and Janice Hahn, to look at building a mental health facility focused on hospitalization on the lockup side, but also beds on the private side. And people always say, well, where are you going to put the criminals? We still have beds. We still have a jail. Across the way, we've got Twin Towers. Up in the Santa Clarita Valley, we've got Pitches Honor Rancho. And so we've still got jails. This is replacing only one component of it. We've still got Linwood Regional, which is where the women are, which we have to address as well, because it's not, women are not getting outside because it's literally a enclosed facility. So we're going to have to look at that and rethink how we do things, because originally they were going to put it up in the Antelope Valley for women. The board felt it was too far and not fair. So last Tuesday, we pulled it off the table. So I immediately brought in a motion and said, we're going to put affordable housing there. Now we're going to flatten out Mira Loma, and we're going to build affordable housing for individuals that we're talking about trying to get into.
Talking about in the Antelope
In
Valley?
the Antelope Valley.
Yeah, okay.
In the Antelope Valley.
I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the issues around the sheriff lately. I mean, there were many folks who were kind of heartened by his election for various reasons, but then there have been issues that have surfaced that are actually a little disturbing about his, I guess, his position, his hiring decisions. Where have you come down on that one?
Well, I made it very clear. You know, I had originally said that as far as the sheriff goes, he's an elected official. He's held accountable to voters just like I am, and he can hire and fire. What made this one different is that this was a sheriff deputy that had been fired, went through the civil service process, which tends to be more sympathetic to the employee.
Sure.
They not only upheld it, they upheld it 5-0. Prior to going to the commissioners, it went before a hearing officer who upheld the decision as well. So it went hearing officer to the board. I find it problematic that you bring back an individual that was fired for good cause.
Yeah.
Where I really got upset was it had to do with an issue regarding domestic violence.
Yeah.
And the sheriff said that it took the woman too long, and then she left the department. Domestic violence, there are many people that are survivors that took years to come forward.
Yeah.
It is not something that many women want to admit.
Yeah.
And the fact that she left could be an indication of fear. We don't know.
Yeah, it was very disappointing. I thought
that
he made that argument.
It was, and so we wanted to call into question that decision and ask him to rethink it. In addition, we want to know as a board what are our legal abilities as it relates to those type of things, because what he has said is that this is going to be the first of many to come forward.
How did that end up? I mean, is that individual still employed?
To my understanding, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're still talking.
And we're still, well, it's you know, just because you're not reading about it in the front page of the paper doesn't mean it's gone away. I really do. For me, it is about when I go out to different groups, everybody says stand strong, don't give in, you're on the right side. I know I am, but it sure is nice to have other people recognize it. So because people are not reading about it on the front page of the Star News or the LA Times, doesn't mean that it's still not on our board's radar.
It's also great that we have 4 of our 5 supervisors are female and can relate a little bit better.
Yeah, well, when I
Some of
started,
us
I know
guys.
when I started, it was 5 men who were great men, by the way. I had the honor and
Sure.
privilege of working with Kenny Hahn, who
now Janice.
now I work with his daughter Janice, who is. They're 2 drops of water.
Yeah.
Her dad would be incredibly proud, and he is every Tuesday.
She's terrific.
Yeah, but yeah, 4 women. I mean, we look at it through a different light. But understand this: Sheila Kuehl is the author of so much legislation up in Sacramento as it relates to domestic violence. So it really hit a chord with her as well.
Education. I have the privilege of being on the PCC Board of Trustees, and I
thank you for your service.
Thank you very much. We look at education at sort of locally, but also on a national level, and some of the things that are going on. The kind of preparation that we need K through 12. Also the fact that community colleges are now the what used to be high school. You kind of need a community college degree or certificate of some kind to get work. California's always been very generous about education. The taxpayers have, but it's always continually evolving. There are different demographics now in education. What is it that the county? How does the county engage in some of these educational issues?
Well, we have LACO, Los Angeles Office of Education, LA County Office of Education. So we oversee education in our probation camps and halls, as well as if there's a charter school that someone applies for a charter school and it's denied by the local jurisdiction, they can appeal to the LACO board. It's a board of education. And then we oversee, for example, with LA Unified School District, that whole issue as it relates to their solvency. If they fall below a certain level, LACO steps in and will address the fact that they are not fiscally healthy.
Yeah, Pasadena, they took a like at too.
They did take it. And Pasadena got a clean bill of health recently.
Finally, knock wood.
Yeah, knock on wood. So our role is limited in that way, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I think, having an elected board for the PCC and having an elected board for Pasadena Unified is good. But what's really important is to communicate and work together. Prior to us, being here today, we've talked about some of the needs at PCC. And there are things that I do with the county that will benefit PCC. And as an elected official, you're bringing those forward, and that's really the way government is supposed to work. Absolutely. Communication is always the key.
I agree.
Even in marriage.
Especially in marriage.
Well, what doesn't help? It doesn't hurt.
So let's talk about the P word, politics, a little bit here. My dad worked for John Kennedy, and I grew up in Washington where there was, we were Democrats, but Little League, it was like Republicans, Democrats, didn't make any difference. Everybody lived together. When you go to PTA meetings together, it's all that's gone away for whatever reason.
Not for me.
No, not for us locally. And I would say locally, and you're a shining example of this because you seem to be able to bridge. I don't know if it's effortlessly, but you bridge pretty well the partisan divide. I know that you had a lot of support from labor, and I understand that you're focused on the policy issues. So I imagine that it's not. But I want to ask you, because you really are an example of some of the bridges. If you're seeing how you regard this partisanship that's come along, and how we can work through it as citizens, in addition to being elected officials.
It's a good question, and it is effortless for me because, I joke and say I grew up with 3 older brothers, so it's survival to get along. But you have to get along. And there's a reason why local politics is nonpartisan. And, everyone says, are you worried about this blue wave? No, I'm not. My record speaks for itself. I've disagreed with this administration in Washington when they've done things that I feel are totally inappropriate and, quite frankly, retaliatory toward the county and toward the state of California. At the same time, there are things like immigration where we can complain at the local level and say, woe is me, but we should be pushing our congressional delegation to pass reforms. Pure and simple. Pure and simple. I grew up, I tell people, I didn't know Jesse Unruh was a Democrat. Because my father, Reagan, really made you lock yourself in a room, figure out how you're going to fix it, and then come out. You can be mad at each other, but give me something to sign. Solve the problem.
Yeah.
So what I've said is I'd rather bring 80% to my constituency than nothing. So for me, it's not about saying I'm a Republican, therefore if you as a Democrat are saying something, you're wrong. Absolutely not. Anthony Portantino and I work well together on issues up in Sacramento. Chris Holden, we're working together. Tom Lackey up in the Antelope Valley.
Yep.
It's important. Christy Smith, who beat Dante Acosta in Santa Clarita.
Yeah.
The voters expect more from us, and we have to lead by example.
It's interesting, when I look at the polls on issues, the Democrats and the Republicans, by and large, if you're not looking at the extremes, but by and large, they agree on most policy issues.
It just depends on who's saying it.
Well, yeah, it's come to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at issues, I don't know, gun violence, even on the life issues, there's a lot of agreement among Americans on this, but the tribalism has really, seems to me, has gotten in the way of that. I mean, it's disappointing to me that, because I believe in the two-party system, and I think that when you have areas like California, for example, that are, where the Republican Party has become fairly weak, and then the opposite in other areas, that damages the democratic system, because you just don't have that. So, I know it's not in our power to solve these ones, but
you lead by example, and when I tell people, my strategist for my campaign, you talk about Kennedy, he worked for the Kennedy campaign. Democrat Bill Carrick, arguably one of the best strategists.
Oh, so Bill worked for you?
Oh yeah, Bill, as much as he says it's a candidate that got it done, I was the perfect candidate, had never run for office. Bill is great at what he does.
Yeah.
He let me be who I am.
Yeah.
And I tell people, you can't change me. I'm too old to change. What you see is what you get, warts and all.
Yeah.
But Bill understood how to navigate the political arena. So it wasn't about hiring a Republican strategist. It was about hiring someone that I trusted, that understood the complexity of the county.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to lead by example. And I'm not going to get in the mud. I think social media has really been a curse.
Yeah.
Because I read so many unkind things on both sides of the aisle, on both sides of the aisle, that make me sick.
Yeah.
And I, this morning was listening on the radio to the actor in Chicago that used the whole MAGA. Is it Make America?
Right.
MAGA.
MAGA, yeah.
Yeah. It just reinforces that hate.
Yeah.
And it's too bad. It really is. It's not. This is not the country that I live in. By the way, an individual is not going to define my party.
Right.
My party is based on principles, not on an individual.
Right.
And so, people say, well, you should not be a Republican anymore. First of all, my father would turn over in his grave. But second of all, then who am I if I do that? Am I doing this because it's politically the right thing to do? Absolutely not. Again, my record speaks for itself.
Yeah, well, that's what I tell my friends in the extreme of the Democratic Party. I said, well, I grew up with John Kennedy, and I think if the situations were switched, I'd have a tough time abandoning my party, which is not to say that I'm, that I would go to extremes to defend what I thought was wrong, but no, I understand. I understand it.
And that's exactly right. I will not go to extremes to defend someone who tweets unkind, demeaning things, especially about women. Just like I would call out on the Democrat side too. I would hope we'd all do the same. But again, social media has made it so easy.
I know. Well, it's because of the anonymity of it too. You can just, I'm sure you've been subject to, you've been a target of this, I'm sure.
Well, you get thick skin, and I know I need to lose a few. I know that my hair turns colors. It's okay. Sticks and stones will, but at the end of the day, I remain to who I am.
Well, people have argued, and I think there's a very good, Terry Tornick is one of those, and he said what's really happening, the real progress is going on locally. That's where we're really getting things done. Even whether it's on the state level or the local level, and because we're so gridlocked in Washington that we really can get things done locally. Now, there's challenges, and it helps to have a little federal support and federal money, but I think California's an example. If we don't get it, we're going to keep moving ahead. We're not going to stop.
Well, we have to work together. And this morning, again, I was listening to the news. I'm a news junkie. And Ben Carson was out here, and he made a comment on the news. that really, I think, took me by surprise, and that is, you can't listen to, we've got to do what's right. And he almost, in a way, said, ignore the president, because he's not saying what you need to do. Ben Carson is talking about the need to allow people to break the cycle. When I talk, coming full circle, work on welfare reform, break the cycle. Give them the tools to become self-sufficient. Allow them to be on Section 8 housing. But rather than making them certify each year, give them 3 years. Allow them to save their money. Don't penalize them. Encourage them to get off of Section 8.
Yeah, I mean, and to bring up housing too. I mean, one of the things, we had a city council person, Andy Wilson, who ran recently, and housing was a big issue there. Development, and we live in a, we grew up, or I didn't grow up here, but you did, and people were used to Pasadena as being a kind of a comfortable, suburban almost community. And now with the metro, we're getting, and I think it's exciting actually, we're getting development along the metro line and the 210. And Andy took some flack for it, but I think that's sort of progress. You do hear people complaining about traffic and things, but I think that for a community like Pasadena, we've actually handled it fairly well, because we've done very we've had a lot of oversight of our planning and zoning and things like that. So I just wanted to ask you where you come down on housing issues, the affordability. I have kids who can't afford to live in Pasadena.
Define affordable now. I mean, really define affordable. It's all relative.
I mean, what, $750,000 for a 1,000 square foot house? Is that what's
Again,
affordable?
I feel like my mother. I remember my mother saying, "You poor kids, I don't know how you're going to do it." Now I'm saying the same thing. You poor kids, I don't know how you're going to do it. What I will say is, one of the proposals that Pasadena brought forward, which I was thrilled, Mayor Tornick is a true leader, is to take the ACT grade at California and Arroyo, where the Gold Line crosses, and make that no longer ACT grade. I think that is going to relieve, I know that is going to relieve the congestion in that corridor. That's one of the biggest complaints I hear, and I know when Mayor Bogard was mayor, we would talk about it, because he would get a lot of complaints at Glenarm. You can miss 4 lights to try to get out of there. So I think that is going to give relief. Just like you can go down Green Street and avoid the Gold Line there, you're going to be able to do that. It's going to help first responders who have been frustrated by it as well. So that's coming as a result of the 710 no longer being in play. They're using their money to do that.
What about the urbanization? Is that a NIMBY issue, really, you think, or do people, or is it progress, or what do you think?
It's driven by resources, and understand this: there is an incentive to build on transit-oriented or transit area corridors. Part of that is because our focus is first and last mile. Uber, Lyft, cabs have all really made it so that if you can get someone within a mile of a transit, the thought is we can encourage them to begin using transit. I think it's going to be the next generation. I think it's going to be hard to get people out of their cars. But with that, the state has really put an enticement to building along transit corridors, as the city of LA has as well. And so there's a financial incentive to do that. It's frustrating to people because they feel it's building in congestion, and it is. But at the same time, we have to build more housing. One of the things I'm looking at is you can buy a mobile home park for $55,000 or a mobile home for $55,000, which is a home. It's nice. Now it's not mobile. It stays in one place. The problem here is that in order to get a loan for one of those, it's not a conventional loan because you don't own the land. So we're looking at where we have county excess property up in the Antelope Valley, and we can help people become first-time homeowners. And if you want to see what it looks like, if you go down the 210 freeway right before it hits the 5, past all of you, there's a mobile home park there that I would defy anybody to tell me it is not beautiful. I believe we can do that. That's affordable housing. That's 55 would get you a very nice home. We need to do more of that and allow people to get loans that are more in line with buying a structure home. Right now, the interest rate is in the double digits to purchase a mobile home park, which makes it cost prohibitive for many people.
Well, I know that the designers and the architects are thinking up all kinds of innovative and creative ways to do mobile home housing. The other thing is we happen to have a guest house in the back of our house, which was built during the war, World War II, when there was a housing shortage, and they allowed everybody to build granny flats. And now I think some of the cities are actually being...
And the county.
And the county are saying you kind of got to do some of this. I don't know about San Marino, but
Well, if they're not, I think they're doing it anyway. But I won't tell you where. But not me.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. No. San Marino's under the gun. I mean, I think that's one of the things.
I'm kidding.
It's been an issue though.
Yeah,
I know
it has. I know it has.
It's been because all cities are required now to comply with affordable housing.
Yeah.
And for places, that don't have apartments or condos, it is a challenge. And San Marino falls into that criteria.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I know that this is something they've struggled with.
Yeah. But it's a stopgap. It's not really. I mean, I think your thought about having a planned community that's affordable makes much more sense than trying to stick a granny flat in the back of everybody's house.
Jack Kemp, when I was working for Mike Antonovich, came and he was talking about how in Chicago, with Section 8 housing, he took a building and allowed people to be they're paying toward ownership. Crime went down, pride in ownership went up.
Yeah.
I would love to do that here, where we don't put people in Section 8 housing. We give them an opportunity, just like you and I had, to own our own home, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, well, that's the basis. That's capitalism, and that's the great thing about it. Before we quit, which was going to be in just a minute or two, I'd like you to say just a few words about Mike Antonovich and your service with him, and his legacy and what he's accomplished for the county, because I know has been such an important figure.
If not for Mike Antonovich, I wouldn't be sitting here being interviewed by you. There's no question about it. Mike, truly a mentor. We can agree to disagree. The great thing about Mike is Mike brought people around him not of like minds, but we all knew that at the end of the day, Mike made the decision on what that was going to be. His political instinct is like nobody I've ever met. He is incredibly street smart, but also brain smart. Great teacher, has friends everywhere. Started fatherhood later, and is an incredible father, a credible husband. But more importantly for me, he incredible mentor and someone who I never ever forget. Gave me the opportunity to succeed him in office.
So are there more folks like you on the other side of the aisle from where I sit that we can look forward to for leadership in California? And I'm sure there are, but I think it's so important what you do and what your position is.
I've been fortunate in my life. I'm not doing this because I needed a job. Public service, I really am a public servant, and I tell people this is a job. So for me, the glass was half full when I was running, which I think helped me, because it was not a do or die. For me, it was, if it's meant to be, I will do it. And as a Barger, we don't do anything half. We go all out. And then Carrick helped me. But my glass was half full. I hope that we get more people that are looking at this not as an occupation, but of truly giving back.
Right, and also I think that to be able to mend some of this partisan divide too, because it's very important to have different viewpoints in politics, and because I think what can happen is you get into groupthink if you're too much within the bubble, and that can lead to very bad policy. Because you're not looking at facts, you're looking at ideology.
And no one wins in that situation.
Absolutely.
They don't. And then everyone hears a soundbite, they don't know everything that happened.
Well, I'm glad that this was more than a soundbite, that we had a chance to really talk and to get to know you a little bit better. It's been a thrill to have you, and really a delight. And keep up the good work. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you, and thank you for your service. So I look forward to working with you on issues as it relates to
you got it.
Education.
You got it. Thanks, Kathryn.
Thank you. A pleasure.